You hit that.
So shall I do the questions, the microphone for questions? Yes, we have one. Okay, so they have mine.
Michaela, can you just say a few things for us so we can hear you?
Hello, David. Good afternoon.
Keep going. Tell us what you had for lunch.
No, I'm not going to tell you what I had for lunch. It would be a disappointment. So how was the conference so far? A big success, right?
Yeah, it's been very good. Lots of interesting presentations. Good. That's great. Thank you.
So I will talk to Michaela. So Michaela, we've turned the camera off of the computer that's hosting the PowerPoints. That's who Plenary is. The camera that's live streaming is this one, which is my camera, which I think I'm not pointing at this one. And are you hearing us okay?
Yes.
Sorry.
Do you want me to switch off my camera or?
No, keep your camera on. It's absolutely fine. When Lisa is having her presentation, no one will be able to see you but me. But, you know, that's fine. But just, yeah, if you keep yourself muted, it should all be fine. Whew.
Yeah.
Hello, Michaela. Just saying hello before I go and sit down. It's nice to have you with us.
Yeah, thank you. Hi.
Okay, if we could take a seat, please, so we can start. That had a big impact. Okay, let's make a start. Good to see you all. And sorry. Okay, welcome to this survivors session of the what's been an excellent RSA conference. I think we can all agree with really enjoyed it. It's been great to see old friends and meet new friends and have conversations. It's been absolutely brilliant. So a big congratulations to the RSA team for a wonderful conference. So if you don't know me, I'm David Bailey. I'm chairing this closing plenary session on mission-oriented, I can never say that word, mission-oriented policies and regional economic transitions. Actually, I'm the token male on the panel because we've got two brilliant women, and regional studies is very concerned about gender balance. So I'm here just to make up the numbers and mission-oriented and challenge-oriented approaches have become increasingly popular in recent years in a number of different areas of public policy, notably innovation policy, and have started to be applied in lots of different ways: regional innovation policy, regional policy, and other areas. At the same time, there's been concern about how that approach relates to approaches that have been developed at a regional level and whether it might represent a return to a top-down approach as opposed to bottom-up. So the session is timely in unpacking and critiquing what mission-oriented and challenge-oriented approaches could hold for regional policies. I'm delighted to say we're joined by two excellent speakers in this area, Lisa de Propris and Michaela Triple. First up is Lisa. Lisa is Professor of Regional Economic Development at the Birmingham Business School. She's written widely on innovation ecosystems, competitiveness, regional and industrial policy, and Industry 4.0, where she led the EU RISE project makers. She's going to speak on will mission-oriented policies work for regional transition. So Lisa, over to you.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this closing plenary. It's been a pleasure being here. It really don't think words can express it. And what I'm presenting today is very much something I'm working on, and I want to open a conversation about whether mission-oriented innovation policy work for regional innovation and regional transition. This is something that is very much debated. Well, it started to be debated within the literature on innovation, but I think it is very timely that we address these issues within regional studies. And what I wanted to do today is really to start by very quickly introducing, the 4.0 technologies, and then I'll move on to really say a bit more about what these mission-oriented innovation policies are, just in case some might not be familiar with them. I will then try to discuss whether the top-down, bottom-up tension is very much back in the debate, and how we resolve it, in particular within the EU, when where we have, of course, that innovation and regional policy are very much framed around smart specialization. And I will just finish off with really 2 words about a possible way of framing, a way of reconciling these two points. Now, but I think there is quite a general agreement that these are the typical 4.0 technologies, not just automation and digitalization, but also all the green related technologies. This is because the narrative around the 4th industrial revolution has really been divided in 2 big pillars: a narrative around technological change, so robotization, automation, and so on, and climate change, sustainability. And I do want to stress that I think both of them are important parts of this transition, technological transition that we're going through. The theoretical literature that we use, that one uses to understand technological change, is the literature on system change. This is really going back to the work on technological paradigms, technological niches, and regimes. Now, this literature really explains why we have these waves of technologies that occur in cyclically, and to some extent, what they do, they have this disruptive nature. They change sectors, they change also the way organization might function, they create new sectors, and also, of course, they might create all sorts of new markets. Now, this is a very famous Perez curve on the shift in technological paradigms. And where we are, we're very much in that bit between 3.0 technology really started to decline and the 4.0 technology started to come up. That's the point of transition. This phase, which is where we are now, is very painful, very costly, and actually we need to understand how to navigate it. And what is happening is that we see these new technologies coming through, and we are in a phase of experimentation, of try to apply these technologies in different industry, in different markets. But things are extremely hard still, because of course the incumbents are resisting the change. So this is why we have this tension between change and resistance that we are seeing. Now, a very good, of course, framework to understand transition was provided by Giles with his multi-level perspective paradigm. What it did was really to explain where are these new technologies coming from. And so his idea of the technological niches was really a way of trying to point out where are new ideas coming from and how do they interact with the mainstream technologies that are part of what he calls the socio-technical regimes. So we see that a transition really occurs when we have this literally clashing of new technologies coming from the niches into the existing paradigm. Now, we are talking about transition, and I really want to point out that we're talking about both green and digital transitions. I think both of them have to be taken into account if you really want, in a sense, this transition to be sustainable and to be green and to be really positive for our economy and society. And there's also plenty of evidence that really these two transitions are already underway. Evidence on, for example, increasing use of robotization, digitalization. I just picked really here one of the tens and hundreds of data I could have picked up. At the same time, there's an increasing commitment to green energies, which is very equally growing, despite some of resistance, of course, but there is an increasing momentum around that. What is also quite interesting is the way we always talk about, well, so far they've been treated differently. So there's a digital transition, which takes place mostly within factories and in the production sphere and so on and so forth. And then there's this kind of energy and sustainability, but actually we need to see them as intertwined. And this idea of twin transition is really emerging as an important way of understanding the depth, but the breadth of the change that we are seeing. So we talk about green transition when we see the intersection between green and digital technologies. In some current work that I'm doing, I've tried to really unpack what they mean. And really the only way of seeing them is, in my view at the moment, as we try to build a debate around, is to understand that it's really a mix of the two technologies. So on one way, we can have digitalized green transition every time we've got the adoption of green solutions, which are augmented in their power with the digital technologies. At the same time, we could also have sustainable digital transition, whereby digital transitions or digital technologies have also a very positive externalities towards a sustainability agenda. And there's lots of examples of this, for example, in domotics, where we see a really good blending of sustainable objectives and at the same time, the use of digital technologies, equally in smart farming, and of course, in the way in which we connect different sources of technology and mobility. So there's lots of ways already in which the industries are already redesigning themselves, blending sustainability with digital change. Now, why is this important? This is important because really what we are seeing is that the depth and the breadth of the change is giving an opportunity to resolve, to find new solutions to new problems. And the kind of system change literature tends to look at new solutions because it tends to be more science push. So it's really describing this transition from the emergence of new scientific technology and how this will change society and the economy. But of course, there are also new problems. So there are new problems that we need to solve, which were not the same problems that were there 30, 40 years ago. So we really need to appreciate the combination between understanding the opportunity of the solutions, but also trying to anticipate and work towards solving new problems. So really, one of the key issues around that, though, is to identify these new problems. Because in a sense, once you have a problem, you can look for a solution. But how do you look for a problem? Of course, we do this now. We know we've got, and that's where we are moving now onto a more demand pull innovation approach, whereby we see problems, we see issues that we want to address, and all the work by Mazzucato has been in that direction, is really about trying to identify challenges that need a solution. The key issue here is that it's using frontier knowledge to really achieve a certain objective, the mission, solve that challenge, address that challenge. Now, this demand pull, demand side type of innovation policy, but also approach to technological change has really gained momentum. And what we see is that the formulation of grand challenges, for example, around the UN Sustainable Development Goals is very popular. I mean, literally, I think every government now is aware of these issues. And what I think is very positive is that we thought these objectives to really be objective for emerging and developing economies. But in fact, I think they've created a common platform for resolving common problems in a way that probably will really make the change significantly more, I'm not saying quicker, but certainly more what's the word, more sure in its realization. So really, we're looking at demand-driven innovation. We're looking at setting up problems, identifying problems, and then see what technologies will solve those problems. So drive the innovation and the innovation process through the challenges that innovation needs to deliver. So this is the main tenet of this approach, is to look for a purpose, or find a purpose, identify a purpose, and really use this purpose to drive technological change and innovation. And the idea was really in the work that Mazzucato really started, is to use, for example, the Apollo mission as a benchmark. And what she did was to use that one as almost as a guideline. So what to do to use this or deploy this purpose-driven innovation approach. The key issues here are that to put a man on the moon, what they had to do is have really strong government commitment, having a very, very well shared vision of what that commitment was. In the Apollo mission was also lots of money was spent on it, and was used to do huge debate whether that was a good way of spending the money. But finally, having the role of NASA to coordinate all that, and all of you who have read this, the work I'm talking about, really can relate to that. So the missions are important, and they drive the process of change to the extent that they coordinate the effort of bringing together different technologies which are developing separately to find a solution to a single problem. Now, I would think that this type of mission-oriented innovation approaches are very much similar to the science and technology policy we used to study a little bit in the past, whereby we are talking about a national level, top-down approach, which is somehow providing the leadership, providing a vision, but also choosing that important purpose. And this idea of intentionality in the prioritization of the different missions. So it means that it's not really a bottom-up and organic process, but there's a clear intention to choose these missions and to pursue them through a process of technological change. The other important aspect of the science and technology policy were to have a key specialized stakeholder who can actually coordinate and provide leadership to those policies in the same way as NASA did within the Apollo program. Of course, they are top down. They tend to be space blind. Why? Because they're trying to really use the best of the best. You're trying to bring together technologies and that are very much on the frontier for them to be then reconciled within the same problem-solving process. They are focused on technology, and very much they could be triggering processes of cross-disciplinary fertilization. This is the link with our twin transitions. This is why when we're talking about mission-oriented policy, very often we see that digital and sustainable are coming together, because they have to be seen as very much these two sides of the same coin. So to deliver these mission-oriented policy, if they are at the national level, certainly I can see an increased role for national innovation systems, a way in which national innovation system will play an increasing role in coordinating, providing an infrastructure, providing leadership, but also providing the instruments to deliver this process, which then will resolve the problem which is set up in the first place. Now, the European Union as well has, I think, made a very interesting attempt recently to almost set up a European innovation system through its big platform like the European Digital Agenda or the European Green Deal. The way in which this mission-oriented innovation policy work, as you can see from the chart, one can identify a grand challenge, could be cleaning oceans, really big challenges, which are in a sense fundamental that it's a societal challenge, fundamental to our lives. These are then they are translated into missions, and then eventually these missions are achieved through projects that feed towards these missions. A key aspect of mission-oriented policy is the directionality. These are top-down policies, which means that the top will provide ambition, a vision, certainly a destination, and that's the challenge. Now, in my view, the problem with that is that it means also prioritizing. You have to prioritize something as against something else. So some challenges will be prioritized as against other challenges, because of course there is always a constraint on resources. It means also selecting. It means somehow backing some actors or some technologies or some sector more than others. But also, finally, it means you're excluding some. There is a process of selection, which will say some of these technologies will not need to be developed. And as I said, I think the European Union has made quite an interesting attempt to catalyze the attention, but also the forces and the interest of a number of stakeholders around big challenges, like, for instance, as I said, the European Green Deal and the European Digital Agenda, or, for example, the way in which it has shaped the European Horizon Europe program, choosing specific areas of intervention, which again, they coincide with challenges which have a huge impact on economy and society. Is top-down bad? And this is a very important question, and I am not entirely sure. What I think, and I think this is something, why this is a conversation, we are at a critical time in our kind of technological change curve, whereby there is a technological race going on. So, Europe, as much as Asia or the US, they are really racing, trying to control and to somehow develop technologies and have ownership of these technologies. Why? Because it matters. It matters who's controlling those technologies. It matters not to be dependent on other countries for those technologies. And of course, that is in itself a very important point that needs to be taken into account. We are not at a phase where incremental change is occurring. We are at a point where radical new technologies and new technological paradigm is coming in. So of course, big infrastructure investment will have to take place. And this requires, of course, a level of intervention that is national or even European in the European Union case. However, this means at the very same time that somehow somebody has to choose ex ante the purposes, the challenges, the missions. Somebody has to choose what matters over other things that will not happen. That in itself this is the problem of top down. It's a selective process, but also it's an exclusion process. And the other issue that I just want to draw your attention is that because the technological race somehow is between really big parts of the world, big players, each player wants to rely on the best and the brightest. So, for example, if we're thinking about at the national level and the European level, this means that if you're trying to achieve a certain objective, there is a mission, you want the best possible resources working around that to achieve that mission. That is great, and that's what you want to do. Now, that also means that at the spatial level, which is what we're interested here, this could create increasing wider and wider disparities. Because some players will be entering this tier of technological advancement and other will not. So what we so far what I've been saying is that both the literature on system change, Schumpeter, even Carlotta Perez, they really see technological change in a space blind way. But equally, the mission-oriented approach to innovation policy is space blind because it's looking at missions and is really top down. On the other hand, we know better than anybody around that space matters a lot because technology at the end of the day is implemented within industries and is therefore industry are spatially concentrated. So when we talk about technologies, they don't really fly about, but they tend to land, they anchored in places. And this is something that, of course, we know. We know why, because we know that place matters. We know that, specialization, agglomeration matters. We know that innovation is systemic. And of course, what we know is that there's a huge literature that are, all this already. There is a path dependency problem. Just even before we start thinking about technological change, we knew there was path dependence at a time of incremental innovation. So when we're looking at the way in which transitions are occurring, we could start thinking about adding a spatial dimension to for example, the multi-level perspective, whereby these niches are located somewhere, and they then somehow connect with places where they are dominated by existing technologies, in kind of 3.0 technologies. The intersection and the meeting point between the new niches and the existing places is where the transition is taking place. But it's taking place at the place-based level. So I'm trying to take the conversation, we need to move it down a step where we're looking at what happens at places. In all this big conversation about really societal challenges, where is the place? Where are the local actors? What is their role? And what we've seen from initial work on the impact of 4.0 technologies on regions, we already seen that to some extent 4.0 technology will increase the level of regional disparities. So we already know that 4.0 technology will somehow strengthen or still maintain a cleavage between high performing regions and low performing regions. So there is no convergence, but it will be increasing divergence. So that we see a divide, maybe a digital or an innovation divide emerging from the adoption of 4.0 technologies. Even before we talk about challenge-driven approaches to innovation policy. I mean, Mazzucato herself is suggesting that actually some spillovers occurred out of the Apollo program. Some unintentional consequences occurred. A trail is mentioned of application across many sectors. But we know trickle down doesn't trickle down. And so expecting things to happen unintentionally, I don't know, it's something that we know might not necessarily be a desirable outcome. We see already that the approach, however, this mission-oriented approach has been already embedded or adopted within European regional policy, whereby this mission-oriented approach has been somehow recombined with smart specialization strategies, for example, in the formulation of S4 strategies. So we see already that this approach is coming into play within innovation, systemic policies, because smart specialization is, of course, bottom-up, systemic, it involves stakeholders, and it's very much place-based. So we see this multi-tier kind of level at the moment taking place. The mission-oriented policies are very much top-down. smart specialization or bottom up, I think I don't know how, but there must be a way of reconciling all this. Because my fear is that otherwise we're going to see really increasing a real problem of divergence, which is even more somehow problematic than just what innovation, new technologies would bring in. So it's just about bottom up, but it's also about the middle and out. Because if the implementation of these mission-oriented policy are really creating centers of excellence, for example, at the national level, how are these really properly connecting with local places where there are no centers of excellence? So how we can create bottom-up and middle and out approaches whereby innovation becomes pervasive, because otherwise we won't have inclusive growth. There will be really exclusive growth. And this is not something that is, of course, desirable for any country or region. This is the kind of nested innovation system that we are working on at the moment with a colleague of mine, Marco Bellando. We're looking at how we can imagine the national, the regional system has really been made of a complex set of stakeholders, but we need to really include more stakeholders, not just the triple helix, but for example, clearly define and clearly tasked stakeholders, for example, with environmental objectives, which have to be part of that infrastructure. Now, I want to very quickly, I've got a couple of minutes to conclude with a case study that we are developing. We're developing 3 case studies: UK, Sweden, and Italy. And in the Swedish case, what is very interesting, which is clearly Sweden is an extremely innovative country. Innovation tends to take place within the regional innovation agencies, which they are connecting with the smart specialization strategies. You have the innovation infrastructure around Vinnova, and of course you've got the Swedish Research Council, which is very much in charge of allocating academic funding for research from the Horizon Europe. As I said, Sweden is a very innovative country, always coming top 3 or 5 in all sorts of innovation classification, has a very complex, well-structured, well-oiled national innovation system, but also has an infrastructure that deliver also innovation policies at the regional level. And this is done in particular with the work of Vinnova. And in particular, Vinnova has a number of programs, and it has had for about 12 years a very interesting program that is called Vinvex. And what it does, it really provides support for the recasting, their reorganization of places which are going through industrial restructuring, using a very much a bottom-up, triple helix, regional innovation system type of approach. At the same time, in the last few years, they've introduced, for example, programs that are more technology-based, like the strategic innovation programs. So they're trying somehow to create a matrix of places and technologies. And the places represent also sectors, like pulp and paper, for example. What are you going to do when you have forestry, you have pulp and paper, and nobody reads books anymore? How are you going to restructure that? It's through technology, but also by understanding the system that is in that location. Now, I was in Sweden this year, and I found out that, again, they're going through a process of reorganization of the policies, and they're really buying into these mission-oriented innovation policy, and they are introducing impact innovation programs, whereby everything goes through big challenges, big objectives, where every stakeholder is invited to very much work towards that challenge. And the spatial element seems to be really lost in that process. And that somehow for me rang a bell, because it is the beginning of a wave whereby what was bottom-up approaches are going to be more top-down, or it's just that there is an adjustment and we're just trying to find out a good balance between bottom-up and top-down. So I think these are very much interesting times. So what I've been trying to open a conversation with you today is understanding the power at the moment of mission-oriented innovation policies and how they are appealing to national governments because of the fact that they address big societal challenges and they enable them also to position their technological infrastructure versus other countries or other parts of the world. And there is a very strong perception of a technological race that seems to be therefore concentrating the minds more than really understanding that at the end of the day, all those technologies have to make everybody's life better. And so we cannot simply, I know they've got big challenges, but those big challenges have to be at the end of the day very much go all the way down to individual households and people and localities. I think the challenge for this community to understand the literature around these issues and really trying to question where are the places in this debate. Thank you.
Excellent, Lisa. Thank you. Bang on time. And I guess that raises the question of Houston, do we have a problem? Moving on, our second speaker needs little in the way of introduction. Michaela Trippel is Professor of Economic Geography at the University of Vienna. She's written widely on regional industrial development paths, transformation and policy, and across a range of leading journals. I'm delighted to say she's had 2 excellent papers in regional studies this year, which are well worth reading. Michaela is going to speak today on beyond mission-oriented policies for regional economic transition. So Michaela, hopefully you can hear us, and over to you.
Yes, thanks, David. Can you see my my screen?
Yes, we can.
Super. So good afternoon, everyone. Greetings from Vienna to London. Thanks a lot for inviting me to take part in this closing session of the RSI Winter Conference. Unfortunately, I couldn't travel to London. There are just too many meetings here in Vienna in relation to an evaluation of our faculty. It's really a nightmare, but so many thanks for making it possible to join you online. So I am going to give a short presentation on mission-oriented policies for regional economic transitions, or more precisely, why we might wish to move beyond a mission-oriented approach. So then let me start by saying that, well, there is now a widespread consensus that the current generation of regional innovation policies requires a critical rethinking, a reorientation. The challenges and crises of our times, the climate urgency, the resumption of inequality and other so-called slow burn crises, as well as sudden shocks like the ongoing pandemic and wars like the one in the Ukraine. So they call for new policy approaches to support what is termed purpose-driven transformation. So approaches that help to, as Ron Martin put it, approaches that help to build sustainable structures and pathways in response to societal challenges. And there are high hopes that new approaches such as regional mission-oriented, problem-oriented, or challenge-oriented approaches could really help to promote innovation activities that drive socio-economic, socio-technical, socio-ecological transitions that are urgently needed. So these new regional policy approaches are clearly inspired by the broader literature on new scientific frames for innovation policy, which are reflected in academic work on mission-oriented and transformative innovation policy approaches. Lisa has already mentioned it. They are place blind, so they lack sensitivity and attention to context-specific factors that influence transitions, but still they are an important source of inspiration for the regional versions. And what these approaches have in common is that they really question policies that focus primarily on innovation for economic growth. They advocate a reorientation of innovation policy towards societal challenges. They stress that innovation policy should not only influence the rate, but also the direction of innovation, and that in this context, a focus on fixing market failures and repairing structural innovation system failures is not sufficient when we talk about the core tasks or goals of policy making and the reasons for justifying policy interventions. So just think of the mission-oriented approach. Lisa has done an excellent job in summarizing what this approach is about. Builds on the idea that grand societal challenges could be or should be the starting point for policy making, and that these challenges could be transformed into clearly defined policy goals, and that policymakers should create and shape markets and not only fix market failures. Schott and Steinmüller, who advocate a new framing of innovation policy, which they call transformative change. So a frame that refers to innovation as a means to invoke radical system change. And this does not only involve technology development and shifts in production processes, but also changes in consumption patterns and ways of living. So transformative change, radical system change is seen as an essential strategy to address a diverse range of sustainability challenges. And this is very different from older framings, right? The older framings that see the role of innovation in contributing to economic growth, and frames that confine the role of innovation policy to fix market failures and structural system failures. So the debate is now clearly shifting towards what is called transformative system failures, which include directionality, demand articulation, coordination, and reflexivity failures. And these new frames have clearly informed national and even more importantly, supranational policies. So in Europe, the supranational policy landscape is in transition. Just think of the European Green Deal, Europe's contribution to the Sustainable Development Goals, or the EU missions such as adaptation to climate change, or the Recovery and Resilience Facility that aims to promote, amongst other things, green transition, sustainable and inclusive growth, and social and territorial cohesion. And well, this is having effects on current regional policy practices, which are guided by the concept of smart specialization, at least in Europe, but also in some other parts of the world. And as you of course know, smart spec is a very advanced concept, a concept that advocates place-based and evidence-based innovation policies that promote the modernization of regional economies and their diversification into new fields, so fields that could become new sources of growth. And these diversification efforts should be based on regional strengths and historically grown assets. So these assets should serve as a platform for diversification. And there is now a rich empirical literature that has analyzed how the concept has been translated into policy practice, or how it has been implanted on the ground. And well, the empirical evidence suggests that some regions have been quite successful in developing smart spec strategies, but at the same time, this empirical work also points to policy coordination failures, and it points to various prioritization and stakeholder inclusion challenges, in particular in less developed regions. So in regions with limited diversification potentials and weak institutional capacities, one can observe the selection of priority areas that show a bias towards existing paths, incremental innovation, so paths that do not really open up directions for future development. And there is also evidence that the inclusion of stakeholders has been a challenging task. In particular, civil society has not been well represented. So smart spec has featured a rather elitist approach to innovation, and there is also a lot of evidence of policy capture by incumbents. And a fundamental critique of smart spec has been, and in a way still is, so the critique is that it is a rather conventional growth-oriented policy approach, and that given the challenges of our time, a stronger emphasis on environmental and social goals is needed. And the good news is that smart specialization is on the move now. So recent work has sought to adapt the approach to respond to societal challenges. Based on a report by Phil McCann and Luke Soete in 2 years ago, and other work as well, the Joint Research Center in Seville has recently come up with what is called the Partnerships for Regional Innovation Approach. So this is a framework that seeks to combine smart specialization with the goals of the European Green Deal and other EU policies. And the intention here is to link place-based opportunities and problems to the new generation of EU policies. The interesting thing about the PRIs, or the Partnerships of Regional Innovation Approach, is that it breaks with smart spec as we know it. So because it adds directionality towards sustainability to transformation. The entrepreneurial discovery process should be replaced by a so-called open discovery process, which implies, amongst other things, to broaden engagement by including new sets of stakeholders, and more attention should be given to coordination failures. So overcoming policy silos is really a central theme in the playbook that outlines the PRI. So regions are now supposed to define their sustainable development strategies. They should identify local challenges and opportunities and link them to the European Green Deal and other EU policies. And they're supposed to develop transformative innovations that produce co-benefits for the economy, the society, and the environment. And as you might know, a couple of months ago, a pilot project on the PRI was launched. This is the next big regional innovation policy experiment in Europe. In this pilot exercise, more than 60 regions across Europe are taking part. And this experiment is an important one to watch. It remains to be seen how different types of regions will embrace the PRI, how they are going to incorporate PRI elements in their place-based policy repertoires, how they will work within large stakeholder groups, and what kind of transformative innovations will emerge, and which regions will benefit the most from transformative innovation. And it will be interesting to observe how regions are going to ensure that economic concerns do not continue to trump environmental and social issues. So there are a number of other concerns with the PRI, or with mission-oriented approaches more generally. As regards the PRI, it needs to be highlighted that the partnerships for regional innovation are conceived as complementary to the smart spec strategies that regions have just developed for the new funding period. And this could mean different things, right? So it could mean that some regions will just add some transformative elements to current conventional strategies, or it could mean that some regions develop transformative strategies which then exist side by side with more conventional strategies. This remains to be seen. And the core question here really is what will be the outcome of such policy layering or parallel policy making exercises? We don't know yet what the outcome will be. So, and then so with respect to mission-oriented policies more generally there have been critical examinations, and the argument has been put forward that a mission-oriented approach would constitute fussy policy making, and it has been criticized for underestimating the complexity of today's missions, so the earth shots that are required to tackle societal challenges which are characterized by a high degree of complexity and wickedness are very different from the moon shots, right? They're clearly defined scientific and technological problems and solutions. So the experiences made with old missions might be of little help for tackling the challenges we are currently facing. And then there are unresolved questions such as how to localize missions, how to select missions, how to ensure that the selection process is open and inclusive, so that it allows for public participation. How to translate missions into concrete actions is another unresolved issue. And then there are, of course, also concerns that mission-oriented policies are too demanding for regions with weaker policy capacities or nations with weaker policy capacities. A mission-oriented approach is imposing extraordinary demands on policy actors, and regions and countries might really struggle to develop their required capacities and to break with public administration traditions which are incompatible with the complex mission-oriented tasks that governments are supposed to execute. And finally, well, needs to be, of course, mentioned that there are different versions or different interpretations of mission-oriented policies, but for those that are inspired by an STI model, so science and technology-based approach to innovation. So for those versions of mission-oriented policies, one can, of course, critically ask if all regions can embrace such an approach. So in what follows, I would like to say a few words about a potential alternative approach that is perhaps less high-tech oriented, only high-tech oriented and STI orientated as an approach that could benefit more sectors and regions, and I refer to it as a place-based, challenge-oriented approach. This is based on recent work on what we call challenge-oriented regional innovation systems. This is an approach that brings the risk concept and risk policies in closer touch with an alternative understanding of innovation. So it's an attempt to reorient the concept and policies to a new purpose of innovation. This is solving place-based problems and needs. So just to be a bit more precise, so regarding the purpose and the direction of innovation, a challenge-oriented innovation system approach adopts indeed a broader view and complements the exclusive orientation on economic growth and competitiveness with a focus on place-based problems and needs. And well, this of course then comes with acknowledging a wider set of innovations, so not only technological innovation and innovation in the business sector, but also social innovation, institutional innovations. It comes with the need to move beyond the usual suspect of the triple helix actors and to include so-called new innovation agents from civil society, from the public sector, and so on. So then our approach, the CORIS approach, also ties in with recent debates on an alternative on an alternative regional development agenda, one that is less centered on short-term growth and more focused on environmental sustainability and inclusive development. And the approach is also inspired by recent contributions that call for paying more attention to the geography of problems. So where some scholars argue that there is not only a geography of innovation or a geography of solutions, but also a geography of problems. And so different regions have different exposures to environmental challenges, to social challenges, to economic challenges. So they face different challenges. And these region-specific challenges should be key motivations for policy intervention. So, or as Kuhnen and Morgan put it, prioritization should not only be based on entrepreneurial opportunities, but also on place-specific problems and needs. So just checking how much time is left, 5 or 10 minutes, David?
Yeah, 5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay. This is, I will do my best. So I just want to highlight 3 aspects that are discussed in the literature on core-risk policies. The first one concerns the question where priorities and directionalities for regional innovation and development are set in the region or elsewhere. The second one concerns the question, so if we want to understand the nature of core-risk initiatives, then the argument is in favor of comprehensive strategies that so not only innovation but also other core processes should require a critical examination would be the argument here. And the third one is relates to reflections on how place-based innovation system structures need to change in order to enable the core processes that underpin challenge-oriented initiatives. So on the very briefly on the first aspect, so priorities set within the region or somewhere else, the core-risk approach clearly privileges strategies that are negotiated and cultivated in the region over strategies and interventions that are done to the region. So it favors goal setting and the formulation of strategies by regional actors and communities rather than having directionality of change and innovation priorities imposed on them. And then the question is, of course, always, okay, and what are then the options for less developed regions, in particular weaker regional economies that are located in centralized policy regimes? They are, as we know, very dependent on decisions set at the national level or at the EU level. They strongly rely on funding coming from extra-regional sources. And here, I think a decent answer would be that, in particular for those regions, there is a need for national and supranational policies that provide these weaker economies with the much needed asset, support, and power that regional actors require to set development goals and design strategies to tackle the often complex and interrelated place-specific problems they are confronted with. So, and then just a few words about the challenge-oriented initiatives. And I've already mentioned that we understand or that we think that they can best be conceptualized by being underpinned by 4 core processes. And the first one concerns the really, I would say, tricky issue of identifying, framing, and formulating a place-based problem. This process is not straightforward, as argued in a in a recent paper by Flanagan and colleagues, this is a very tricky process. It involves questions such as what is perceived as the problem, which problems are selected as priorities, by whom, and how is this done? What are their perception about the roots and effects of these problems? And it's of course clear that different stakeholders will have different understandings of this issue, and much depends on who is involved in these processes, who is shaping the discourse. And there is, of course, always the danger that powerful incumbents with vested interests just capture these processes. And then the problem framing will, of course, have an impact on the second key process, which is the search for solutions, the development or application of innovation and upscaling processes in the region and beyond. And this might include development or importation of new technologies, but also the development of non-technological solutions or combinations of both, because we know that many sustainability challenges require an integration of a range of technological and non-technological solutions. And then depending on the case under consideration, also unlocking and ex-innovation activities might deem important. So the question of revelation and destabilization of unsustainable activities, practices, networks, and institutional structures could be an important aspect to consider in this challenge, in the challenge-oriented initiatives we are proposing. And this might, of course, involve undermining vested interests and picking the losers, which is can be a very tricky thing. So, and then I think it goes without saying that these three processes come with demanding orchestration needs. So coordinate multiple actors who populate a particular challenge-oriented initiatives is very demanding, because these actors can have very different interests and motivation, and this calls for mediation and formulation of shared visions and setting collective priorities. Horizontal and vertical policy coordination is, of course, also of central importance. So in particular, again, for weaker economies, the question how to mobilize support from national and EU policies is a crucial issue. So, and then I think I will then stop here because there are only 10 minutes left, at least at my clock. So this is here you can see this third dimension, or this third aspect that is currently discussed in the literature. It really relates to the question how historically grown regional innovation systems, which do hardly back challenge-oriented initiatives. They are often unfit for addressing environmental and social challenges. How can these place-based structures be reconfigured to enhance the capacity of regional innovation systems to support several core processes of challenge-oriented initiatives? And we are currently working on conceptualizing different routes. So far we have identified a so-called reorientation route, and this can be distinguished from a transformation route. And so very briefly, reorientation means to enhance the challenge orientation of existing risk elements and functions, and transformation route is very different from that. It's more about creating new challenge-oriented risk elements and functions. So, and this is my last slide. Instead of a long summary or conclusions, I have just so I limited myself to so to say, to summarize what we are currently working on and where the next steps are. And in respect of time, I just focus on the first part on the slide. So currently we're working on getting a better understanding of the nature and geography of the challenge-oriented initiatives that I mentioned before. So we're involved in several EU projects where we have the opportunity to map and analyze such initiatives to better understand how challenge-oriented initiatives evolve over time, and hopefully then in a few months or so, we will have a better answer to the question what benefits are really produced and for whom. So assessing the outcomes of these initiatives ranks of course very high in the research agenda. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Michaela, for a really interesting kind of overview of how to go beyond mission-oriented policies and into challenge-oriented policies. So we've got some time left for questions, and yep, say who you are.
Hi again, Vasilis Mastiotis from LSE. Thanks to both for the presentations and very comprehensive, very good pointers for the debate. I would like to hear your views on the following proposition, that there's the big thing missing in this developing debate is politics, and politics at all levels, the domestic kind of electoral nitty-gritty politics, intergovernmental politics at the European level, but also increasingly geopolitics. You know, the big actors and what's happening to our eastern borders and so forth. And I think this is a fundamental problem because on the one hand, we have a policy which had been quite effectively depoliticized. So, okay, they fight in the council for the allocation of funds, but once that is done, then you have the commission and everything on the cohesion policy is kind of technocratically evaluated and so forth. But then the moment we go to mission-oriented policies, it is problematic at the domestic level, let alone if you think about the European level. You alluded to who decides on the mission and the priorities, the purposes, and so forth. The more you go into challenge-oriented stuff, it involves so many political choices about how you define things, but also how if you distribute property rights, who does what and who benefits from that, who can exploit whatever is being kind of the extra value that is being produced. So, can I have some response on that? How problematic is that we do not have this discussion?
Michaela, would you like to go first?
So if I have understood the comment correctly, then challenge-oriented innovation systems are by far more demanding than mission-oriented innovation policies.
The question was about whether it involves more political choices.
I'm not sure whether it involves more political choices. I think it might be more demanding because it's an approach that comes closer to what one could call innovation democracy, because it operates at the regional level, and at the regional level you have, of course, more opportunities to involve more actors who are well aware about the problems and the assets and how they could be matched. So yes, might be more demanding, but the relation to politics, this is the thing that I didn't really get about the question.
Okay, thanks, Michaela. Lisa, would you like to follow up?
Thank you very much for your question. I think you're right, because when you have to make a decision and selecting and prioritizing and excluding, inevitably it means that you have a view of what is good and what is not worth it. So I think politics will become very important, and it is very important, not only in terms of what is ideologically driving these choices, but also the different tier might have different views. So there could be a lot of conflicts even within countries as things are chosen at the national level and then implemented at the regional level, assuming that there is this distribution of powers, for example. It could be that there isn't. And I think you're right. And the other big issue, which I would add to politics, is that some of these choices are way, how can I put it? They will require more than 5 years implementation, which is the political cycle. So that is another big constraint that is certainly we will face. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yep. Could you say who you are, please?
Sure. Hi, thanks so much. I'm Brady Reed from University of Waterloo in Canada. Also the RSA blog editors. There is a blog if anyone cares. The RSA
Great
has a blog, plugging the blog. I do have a question. So thanks so much for the presentation. It was really great. One thing, and this might be because of my generation or because I'm from North America, but I'm just wondering your thoughts on, and this is more specifically to the twin transitions maybe than the other, but what role does maybe taking a bit more of a critical lens on, who benefits and who's impacted on those transitions, given that, when we think about green and digital transitions, we look at more critical minerals being needed. And so, we see more exploitation, more conflict in maybe the global south and other areas. So how does that play into that framework that you're thinking of, and maybe whether, just transitions or other things play in as well?
So the question is who benefits and how you bring that into
And
the
how
mix.
how you think about that in this sort of framework. Yeah.
Thank you. Michaela, would you like to come back on that?
It was a question for Lisa, right?
To pick it up.
Lisa will pick it up.
Yeah, given it's about twin transition, probably it's a fairer towards Michaela. To some extent, I think it is crucial. And in fact, the one thing that Michaela said was the geography of problems. So we have this geography of problems, which doesn't necessarily match the geography of solutions. And that's why when we talk about grand challenges, about mission-oriented, they are important, but they will, in a sense, they overlook the fact that there is a micro scale that needs to be taken into account. There is a level at which it impacts directly on specific locations. And that's where the politics come in. And this is why I think we need to really shed some light on the role of places, because otherwise things will really create a distortion whereby if the problem of places the geography of problem becomes the geography of the forgotten places, then clearly that's not something that is a desirable outcome.
Any more questions? Elvira.
Thank you very much for two really excellent presentations. I share the concern about the kind of top-down, technocratic, over-centralized nature of these mission-oriented policies and the potential detrimental effect on regional disparities. I think it's a real issue, and I'm very glad that you focus on the kind of the nature of problems, the difference. So therefore, it shouldn't be business as usual with this mission-oriented, but we should focus on the kind of contested and situated and context-specific nature of problems and the geography of problems, as you mentioned. My question is about the instruments that are derived from this problem-oriented innovation policy. Because often we change the frameworks, we change the rationales, we change the discourse, but the policies remain the same. So the instruments that are used, still very supply-oriented, kind of the same instruments that are being used, follow this kind of linear approach, but we give it a different name, but it's the same. So are there any concrete examples of how the policy will look like at the instrument level, at the implementation level?
So a question about what instruments, policy mix and instruments. Either of you want to?
I could bring a little what I've been doing, for example, with Sweden. I think when I had these conversations with Vinnova about the way in which they are restructuring their innovation policies towards really having these challenge-driven policies, and whereby basically the argument was, well, if you are good, then you will be involved in these programs, you will be roped in. And to some extent, that's meant that there was already a selection, an implicit selection process. And when I was challenging them, so how are you going to do that? It means you're going to be choosing to leave some locations out. So the instruments that they're using now seems to be more space blind. And so their argument, for example, in that particular case, when I was really prompting them was, well, but of course we're going to be fair and we will try to engage locations in the projects when the locations have something to add in terms of other solutions or because they are touched by the problems. But the idea of that was an afterthought that was really worrying me to some extent. And this is why I started to really think about, if we take these big challenges within kind of the Horizon Europe is fine. These are really, we need to push the technology. But when we start to mix science and technology policies with innovation policies, that's what my problem is. And you're right, we can't just rename things. And we can't just all of a sudden forget like 30 years of, regional innovation system policies. And I also think that adding a fourth dimension to the smart specialization might not be enough to address exactly the change of instrument that you're talking about.
Michaela, do you have anything to add?
No? Very briefly, so I fully agree that not developing new frameworks and then working with the same instruments which are only supply oriented, this wouldn't work. So there, if you take a look at the playbook, the PRI, there is a wonderful list of old and new policy instruments that could bring such a framework to life. There is demand side policies, public procurement, regulatory sandboxes, other forms of institutional innovations that could and should be implemented. So, so to cut a long story short, working with the same old instruments wouldn't work. So,
thank you. We're going to have to finish there. I'm sure we could carry on. So can we say a big thank you to two brilliant speakers. I've learned a lot this afternoon. And I do love a presentation where I learn a new word, which was exnovation. So thank you, Michaela, very much, and thank you, Lisa. John.
Yeah, thanks, David. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's John Harrison. I'm one of the RSA board members and have the brief for conference and events. And Sally's asked me just to say a few words in 2 minutes, just to say thank you to all of you for coming and supporting the RSA Winter Conference. And I'm conscious that we have both quantitative and qualitative researchers. So I'm going to try and please both of you by starting with some quantitative statistics. So across the last 2 days, we've had 190 papers delivered, 225 delegates. Really important in terms of the ethos of the RSA is to be an inclusive association. So it's really pleasing to say that we've had almost 50-50 gender split between female and male delegates. We nearly made it, 47% female, so we've got a target for next time. Also really important in terms of we have 43 early career delegates and 34 students. So the future of the association is in root health, and thank you for your support. Finally, on this, in terms of figures, we had delegates from 32 countries. Which many of you will be aware there's a rather large sporting event going on in the next month with 32 countries represented. If it's good enough for FIFA to call that the World Cup, I'm calling this a world event. So thank you. Right. For the qualitative researchers out there, I've got a few personal thanks because these events don't happen without the hard work of not only all of you as individual delegates for supporting, but people that have taken particular roles. So to Marcin Dabrowski, who's here at the front, you saw at the opening keynote yesterday, Marcin has been the conference organizer for us and has done a fantastic job putting together the plenary and the panel sessions. Obviously, to all the speakers, moderators, chairs, thank you for saying yes when people have asked you to do various things. And also to Henry Young. Henry picked up the big award last night. So congratulations again, Henry, but thank you for coming to visit us in person to receive the award. Also, events like this are so much better if you're having people like you here. I'm still looking for somebody who's got as much energy and enthusiastic support as you. I've been going for about 15 years. I haven't found anybody. And I think what's really important, I think like your involvement in these events, your enthusiastic support for research, whether it's from the most senior professor here or an early career researcher or a student, it really is unparalleled. So thank you, and we hope to see you again soon. To the venue, to the Holiday Inn that's hosted us for the last couple of days, for feeding us, hosting us, but also the tech support. Without you, these things don't happen, so thank you. Two more things from me. I've not mentioned the RSA team yet. All right, so obviously the whole team, but in particular to Lisa, to Alex and Nicola, who you've seen on the reception desk, and also, I've lost Alex, she's at the front here. They've done an absolutely sterling job putting this on for us, as always. Thank you very much. All of which just leads me to say thank you for supporting the RSA. Thank you for supporting the winter conference. Whether on departing this room now, you're going to go and catch a plane or a train, or you're simply heading to the bar, stay safe. Don't be strangers. Please join the RSA if you're not already a member, and we look forward to seeing you in Ljubljana next year or another RSA event in the near future. Thank you. Brilliant.